Hi everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kira and I'm the Digital Events Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. For those of you who haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup facilitate an annual training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all things digital. You should check out our training and education menu on our website for more events that we have coming up online. But enough about that. I'm excited to welcome you today to Perfecting Payroll using MYOB with Pam Chilman. Pam specialises in the non-for-profit sector, providing support with financial systems and workflows to assist organisations with making full use of their systems and give back time to focus on other areas. Over the past 30 years, she has been based in ACT, having set up and run her own businesses, then worked for an accounting firm for 4 years, heading up their training division. Having recently left the accounting firm, she now consults as Poetry and Numbers, locating in northern New South Wales region of Ballina. Pam is accredited in a number of financial systems, in particular MYOB, having been one of the first MYOB certified consultants in Australia, had a spot on the MYOB Partner Advisory Team, and in 2016 was awarded the MYOB Lifetime Achievement Award. She continues to support the MYOB product range and is here to present you today on the latest and greatest in the product, and in particular payroll tasks at this most important time of year. Some housekeeping first. All your lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on the webinar panel and I will be able to assist you. If you have any questions during the session, please type this into the questions box and Pam will try to answer them during the session, but at the end we will definitely hold a little questions and answer session at the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think throughout the session to make this the most dynamic and interactive as possible. No question is too silly, but also note your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all of the programs to help you have the best experience possible today. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and any slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after this webinar is completed. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there's a short survey at the end of the webinar and we would really appreciate if you take the time to complete that. Thanks for attending today, and I'll hand you over to Pam.
Well, thank you, Kira. That's a fantastic introduction. Hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear from northern New South Wales. So you're hearing my sound okay, Kira?
Yep, all good, perfect.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for that warm introduction. And in particular, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We would all like to pay our respects here to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And with so much going on today, this time of year, I really am delighted that you are able to attend our session. No matter what we have going on, payroll is a really important task, isn't it, to be able to confidently carry out at this important time of year. So you can see our agenda on the screen. We've got a lot of things to cover in our short time available today. And we will go through the payroll preparation and some tasks to complete in MYOB, the processes this year, 2023, ensuring that single touch payroll 2 aspects are addressed as well. We could talk about single touch payroll for the whole session, but we won't. We'll just take some snippets of that in relation to the end of year process. We'll take some questions probably at that point in between, and we'll go through after that and talk about some tips and tools in the MYOB software to assist you in streamlining some of your payroll workflows. Some of the tips that I've learned over the years that I'd like to pass on to you. And when we refer to MYOB, I find there's still a little bit of confusion around which version we're using. Not only maybe we're subscribed to, but also which view we're using. So do you know which version of MYOB you're using? Now, before we jump to a poll, before we do that, I'll just do a couple of screens. I need to do the compulsory disclaimer as well, that the information we're presenting to you today is of a general nature, and if you've got very specific situations that you should seek individual advice according to your scenario. Before we do the poll, do you know which product you're using of MYOB? There's a little bit of history here, I guess. Has anyone been using MYOB since early days and it looks something like this? Back in the original MYOB was actually only available on the Mac platform, and my sister introduced me to the product when she worked at the Apple Centre. So, and we used to get those good old manuals. Maybe your organisation's got some old software boxes sitting out the back in a back office. Maybe you bought one from an old one of those retail outlets, and you've been using MYOB for some time. But in 2006, this is the home page that evolved of what you might see, and some of you may have been using this product up until quite recently. Or in 2012, all of a sudden those colours disappeared and the very purple theme was introduced, and many of us referred to MYOB as MYOB with Payroll or MYOB Premier. But then a few years ago, there was quite a visual change to many of us who have been using MYOB for quite some time, and for some who only subscribed recently, maybe in 2021, you could only access MYOB, you only currently access MYOB via the browser. And MYOB went through some rebranding as well and called the product MYOB Business. And I know some people have been resisting the change and continue to still use the MYOB product online, or maybe you switch between the two. So do you know which version of MYOB you mostly use? Do you use MYOB on the desktop? Do you use MYOB online where you can see what I'm seeing on the screen with the green bar down the bottom? Or maybe you're using MYOB in the browser, which has quite a different look with the menus across the top. Or maybe you switch between the two, possibly. Maybe you're unsure. So Kira, could we activate that poll? I'd be interested just to know our audience today, which product do you mostly use, or does your organisation mostly use? So Kira, could you activate that poll for me and let us know?
I've just launched it now, so we'll just wait for people to give their answers and then I can pull them up on the screen for you.
And while that poll's coming up, we'll give everyone a few minutes because we've got quite a few on board today, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Whilst that poll is being activated, be aware you can access MYOB just from the browser under the app.myob.com link. So I'll show you that in a moment when our poll is finished. And you can switch between the two. If you've been avoiding going onto the browser, maybe give it a go after today and try and see, because it's the same database, it's just a different visual aspect of how you're accessing the software. How are we going?
You should see your answers, yeah, they're on the screen now, Pam.
Okay, so we've got quite a mixture. AccountRight Online, AccountRight Desktop, some going straight to the browser, some switch between the two, and some unsure. So we've got quite a mix today. So I'll try and address everyone's view and look and feel of what you're using, and we will work with both AccountRight Online and in the browser for you as well. Be aware that, thanks for that, Kira, thanks very much. So if you are not yet accessing MYOB from the browser and you have been using the traditional view we've had for many years, up the top right hand corner you can use this open in web browser option, and that will take you to that more updated look and feel. For those who are on the desktop, and hopefully there's not too many still on the desktop, and this is the link, by the way, the app.myob.com. So if you're ever wanting to access MYOB directly from the browser, including for those who are online, you can access it via app.myob.com. And be aware with Payroll, you do need to be online in order to report to the ATO for Single Touch Payroll Phase 2. And possibly some have been resisting using the browser, we'll go through some options today, but be aware for single touch payroll phase 2, which we are now in, that deferral was in place until December 2022. The deferral is now over. So unless you've specifically requested a deferral for your organisation, MYOB had that deferral in place until December 2022. So all businesses and all organisations should now be reporting for their payroll through single touch payroll phase 2, having their MYOB data online, either with the view, either of the views or the browser view that I showed you as well. So either options are appropriate, as long as your MYOB file is online as opposed to being on the desktop. So let's jump into some of the tasks about our payroll preparation and end of year tasks. If you've ever attended any of my webinars in the past, you'll know I love a few checklists. I like to have some tasks that I can follow. We only carry out this task once a year, so I often have to dust off the cobwebs myself and remember what did I do last year and what's different this year. Checklists are great. You may have one yourself, and maybe it needs to be refined now this year. Maybe you are just using the browser, or maybe you've changed from another accounting system. So it's a good opportunity to refresh today some of the tasks and maybe change some of the terminology if you are now working in the browser. Functionality is similar, so what I present to you works equally in the browser as it does in the online option. So what are some of the tasks you may have on your checklist, or maybe you're developing one today? The first thing I think about is what my last pay run date is. What's the last pay run I still have to do, or have I already put all my pay runs in for this year? And maybe I can complete the finalisation process. Although I'd have to say I don't do the finalisation process normally until quite close to the 30th of June. And that could be because I've had a few staff changes, maybe there's some unexpected redundancies or terminations that need to be dealt with that are outside of a pay run, or there's some adjustments or some catch-up pays where someone didn't put their timesheet in, and we need to just make sure we've completed everything, all those pay runs up to the 30th of June. So what date is your last pay run? Is that on your radar? Maybe it's actually the last day of the payroll year, the 30th of June, which this year is actually a Friday. So anyone got any pays on Fridays, on next Friday? Or maybe you need to get this process done quickly because your first pay run for the new financial year, the new payroll year, is on Monday in July, next Monday. So have a think about when your last pay run date is and what's coming up in your calendar so you can schedule that time, because it is important that we carry out a few extra tasks. Even though we've been reporting throughout the year, some extra tasks that we need to do some balancing for to make sure that finalisation process and those year-to-date totals are correct, because our employees will be looking for that information to do their tax returns and know that they can be ready to do those tax returns. There's always a keen one, isn't there? Now, with single touch payroll, we have normally now needed to get our details up to date for our staff in our card files more quickly than we used to. But it's still a good opportunity to check that the details are all correct for all staff, including your own company details. As Kira mentioned, I've moved north. I needed to change in my own file my company details and update them. So I might just switch into MYOB now. So bear with me as my screen changes. And we'll make sure, let's just see that this works. You should just see the screen switch a moment. I'm actually in a sample company, Clearwater, for our presentation today, just some sample data. So I'm in the online version, so you can see that by down the bottom right. Hopefully you can see the green bar. This is MYOB in the online. Equally works the same in the browser. So for my employees, many of you be familiar in the card file. I want to make sure all my details are correct in the cards list. And rather than having to go into them individually, I tend to use my export feature in my file menu under the export import assistant. And I can easily export my data out to Excel, have a look at that information, And again, if I need to make any changes, I can either do it one by one, or I can import the data in and override and update the details. Maybe we've had a whole lot of staff have some change of details, but it's a really good way instead of having to go in one by one. So does anyone use that import export? It is quite handy, available up in that file menu, import export assistant. Regarding my company information, up in my setup menu, I have my company details. I don't tend to have to go in here too often, but I can go into the company information area and I can update the details, particularly the address, phone number, and email address if that's required. And that does flow through into the single touch payroll area. Let's switch back to our PowerPoint slides and have a look at what's on our list. The other task that I start getting ready for and getting some information together is my fringe benefits tax information. So this is not a calculation MYOB will do, it's information that we need to have on hand and ready, whether we've collated it or whether we've had somebody external collect that information to get the FBT information ready, because we need to put the reportable amounts in as part of the finalisation process. It doesn't happen automatically. We need to access that information, the grossed up figures, ready to key those in as part of this process. I always have a look too at any unusual pays that have been done, any involved terminations, so ETPs, eligible termination payments. I have a look at any complicated ones just to make sure they've all been entered correctly using the right payroll categories, and then do any adjustments if need be. So I keep an eye on, or I normally ask clients whether there's been anything unusual to have a look at, just in case we need to adjust them again before the finalisation process. Now, if you are using somebody external to carry out these tasks, then you may be engaging a BAS or a tax agent. A BAS or a tax agent is required to get an annual declaration from you, not just for doing the payrolls during the year, but a separate declaration. So if you're wondering why they're sending you more declarations, your BAS or tax agent will request that annual authority for them to complete the end of year process for you. So they are probably already starting to send those to you if you are engaging with somebody like myself who's a BAS agent. What else is on our task list? Tax file numbers. Again, we're mostly getting hopefully these throughout the year, and we're putting them into MYOB because that is required when we're reporting through to the ATO. But there is a list of tax file numbers that you can use under certain circumstances. If you have, say, an employee who is under 18 years of age, earns less than $350 a week, or if they're still going through the process of applying for a tax file number with the ATO and 28 days has not passed. So it's a handy set of tax file numbers to have on hand if you are, and particularly throughout the year as well. Staff come and go, and we really should be putting in our dates of terminated staff or the dates that they leave throughout the year. But again, sometimes this doesn't happen. So I put this on my checklist just to check that all the staff that may have left during the year, I've actually put in my dates of terminated staff. I'm going to show you in this process where you can put that information in, because not only do you put it on the card file itself within MYOB, but you also have a separate area within the finalisation screen to notify the ATO, particularly with single touch payroll phase 2. You need to notify them not only the date, but the reason for termination. So seek out that information if you don't already have it on hand, or maybe access it from the card file so that you can have it ready to put in the finalisation area. Now, the next point is fairly obvious, that we would do our bank reconciliations, and we would do the bank reconciliations on a regular basis. But at this time of year, if your reconciliations or you're using bank feeds and going through that process each day or each week, I keep an eye on my bank reconciliations, even if I might not have completed to the end of June, just to make sure there's no payroll related entries that are sitting there. Maybe I had a new staff member, they put their bank account details in and the pay bounced back because it wasn't the right bank account details. I want to make sure there's no entries affecting payroll inside my bank reconciliation. And just a tip for you as well, let me switch back into MYOB. When you're doing your bank reconciliations, let's just switch back into MYOB. Should go back into Clearwater. When you're doing your bank reconciliations, make sure you're actually doing a reconciliation, not just using the feeds. So if I go into my banking area, many of us are hopefully getting used to the wonderful bank feeds feature, and we all click through and we approve the entries, that we match them up. We can see from the bank statements that are coming in, they all agree. And we all get excited, or maybe we use the approve all button and we just approve everything. So it's more, a reconciliation, remember, is more than just clicking on the bank feeds and matching up the entries. Remember to complete the reconciliation down the bottom right-hand corner, because you want to ensure that there's nothing sitting in this screen, which there will be in my training data. I should only have the entries here that are cleared. I wouldn't want to have any rogue entries, such as in this training file from years ago, that may have an impact on my payroll. So again, keep an eye on this reconciliation process as part of your end of year with payroll, just purely from a payroll perspective. All right, let's continue with our balancing process next. So one of the important tasks to complete at the end of payroll year is for balancing the payroll reports to the financial reports. So I actually call this a three-way balancing process. The first part is to balance payroll reports to the financial reports, a really key process to ensure that we're confident that the figures we're reporting are correct year to date, so that the employees can do their tax returns. There's three key reports I run. Again, no matter whether you're in MYOB AccountRight Online or MYOB Business, depending on which version you have, or MYOB in the browser, the report names are the same: the payroll register, the payroll activity, and the payroll summary reports. I like to make these my favourite reports, so I don't have to go searching for them. And in AccountRight Online, they're called custom reports. In the browser version, you can make them your favourite reports. So in fact, I might switch into the browser this time and work in the browser view. So again, bear with me as I switch across. You should now be able to see that I'm in the browser view. In fact, why don't I go to the dashboard, because I was in here earlier, and show you these reports in the browser view. Same name in the AccountRight version online. We just access them from the reporting menu a bit differently. So these three reports, I go into reporting. Under my reports area, I'll do a search for them initially and search under payroll. And to make them my favourites, I can click on them and put a star on them, so you can toggle them on and off. I'm going to make them my favourites so I don't have to keep searching for them each time, and my favourite reports can live up the top left-hand corner here. So under payroll reports, I'll look through my payroll register, my payroll activity, and my payroll summary. And in particular, I want these two reports to be the same figures. They look the same. In fact, I'm just going to run them. This sample company doesn't have much data in it. But for those who like numbers, and I'm sure many of you do, and if you're wanting to balance with me, you can see my gross wage figures, my deductions, my taxes, and my expenses column, which is normally my superannuation, my SGC amount, unless you're also doing your portable long service leave in here as well. So my gross wages, these are key balances that I want to balance to in my register report to my activity report. And you'll see a note across the top when I run some of these reports. When I look at my payroll register report, it does actually give me a warning saying if your activity and register report don't balance, it might suggest that there's been an error and you might need to check on this. But in most cases, if you've been using MYOB throughout the whole payroll year, these figures should be the same on both reports. If they're not, then you might need to investigate why something might have changed and somebody might have been editing the history area. Something to investigate. Payroll summary report I particularly like because it shows me my payroll figures not from an employee perspective, but from a payroll category perspective. Let me just go back to that report. Sorry, it's in a different order. So under my favourites reports, I can see my payroll summary report. I particularly like this report, and again, it's in the AccountRight online version as well. I like this report because I can see my pay item name. In the browser version, it gives me a great summary showing me the STP category, and because this is Clearwater, these ones aren't assigned, but you should see if you are working in your own data, they have the single touch payroll phase 2 category showing, and it's a great way of seeing that they are correctly mapped according to the new STP2 requirements. It gives me totals in this report by pay type. And again, the figures should be the same. It just helps me, as you'll see in a moment, when we're doing our 3-way balancing. So they're my first 3 reports. I balance these reports back to my profit and loss and my balance sheet. So let's go back to my profit and loss. So I can see in here my profit and loss report. And for those that are following on with numbers, oh, and by the way, just check up the top that you are in the right financial year. So I'm working in this financial year, 22-23, because you may not carry out this process until the 4th or the 5th of July, depending on your pay run cycle, after you have completed these pays before your first July pays. So everyone's account structure will be a little bit different, but in this one it's quite simplified. I have one wage expense account and that balances, and my superannuation expense account. So I can, if you were looking at those figures with me before, you can see that they match with my payroll figures. You want your payroll reports to match with your financial reports to make sure it's all flowed through correctly. Your organisation may have a need to split wages and super into more expense accounts and have a lot more detail, but still ultimately they should be, you could maybe subtotal them in here with your different heading accounts, and that will allow you to easily see those totals. The last report I balance to is my balance sheet, again in my business reports at the top. Same reports, same terminology in AccountRight online. And I'll look at all of my payroll related reports. Now, some people might say, well, the balance sheet report is not something that you look at on a regular basis as a payroll officer, maybe, depending on your expertise and your background. But the balance sheet has payroll related accounts in it. And so I encourage you, even if you're not fully working with all the other accounts, to have a look at your balance sheet in relation to your payroll related accounts. In particular, PAYG and superannuation payable, these figures should reflect the balance. It's a balance sheet, so it's the balance as at the end of June, and it should reflect what's outstanding, so your liability for superannuation, your outstanding liability for PAYG at that point in time. So if you paid all your superannuation up to the 30th of June already, your superannuation payable should be nil. It should be nothing. Or if your PAYG outstanding is for the last quarter or maybe the last month, this month of June, that should reflect and be able to be reported on that, the payroll reports, to see what the amount is and balance back to your payroll reports for that month of June. I do also keep an eye on any other payroll related accounts, payroll liabilities, for example. That's probably my deductions. And also some of these clearing accounts that are to do with the payments that I've made that have come out of my bank. Or in this case, I can see there's a figure in the clearing account suggesting that I haven't yet paid the wages. I've got the expense of them, but I haven't yet created that ABA file for the bank and uploaded that into my bank. So it's sitting there waiting to be cleared out from my payroll clearing account. So in summary, this organisation probably is not ready to do the finalisation. I've probably got a little bit of reconciliation work to do. So Clearwater's got a little bit of a few balances here I wasn't expecting, although in the current year for payroll, it looked like those figures balanced to the expense account. But I'd still do my further balancing before I would do my finalisation. No matter which version you're using, I would still use this same cross-checking process. Because as we know, the reports are going through to the tax office. Let me just switch back to my slides. I need to ensure, so this is a summary of the balancing, confirm your activity summary and your register summary match. Reconcile your those payroll reports above to your profit and loss expense accounts, wages, salaries, whatever your account's called, and your superannuation. And ensure your liabilities in your balance sheet do reflect what you owe at that point in time before you go to this next stage. Because remember, whilst we are reporting and declaring the information throughout the year at each pay event, and the totals are reported each pay when we click on that send button, the finalisation process that we're about to do is triggers the ability for the employees to do their tax returns. So whilst the balancing was, you may be carrying out that balancing process each month. I know we've encouraged a lot of our clients to carry out the balancing process at the end of each quarter. But for some organisations, maybe it's only carried out at once a year, because in the past, that's what we've been used to. We've always possibly in the past, before single touch payroll, only done the balancing process when we would issue the payment summaries. So no more payment summaries, as we know. Anyone remember the good old days where we'd create that MDUP file and we'd upload it to the tax office when we knew it was right? We don't have to worry about that process anymore. The good old payment summaries are no longer. Do you have any employees that are still asking you, when do I get my payment summary? You might want to remind them that they're not called payment summaries anymore, they're called income statements. But do they ask you? I know a lot of clients start getting those emails from clients. Or do you communicate the timing with your employees and you're more proactive? So you indicate to them that your last pay run is on the 21st of June and that you will have to them the finalisation done by the 29th of June so they can complete their tax returns. So I find it's good to be on the front foot with the employees, because there's always going to be a few that ask, and let them know that you have some balancing processes to go through. Maybe put the messaging on the pay slip, or maybe even there has been some tax office handouts you can give them, depending on the background of your staff, to actually give them some documents to explain to them about how the process is that they'll get their information. Because for them, they only get it once a year as well. And as, because the employees will already be seeing their year-to-date totals in their MyGov accounts, and they might be thinking they can already do their tax returns, I find it's best to communicate with them that the finalisation process hasn't yet been done at your organisation, and that to let them know when they will be able to access this information so they can book the appointments with their accountants, as many of them that are keen, maybe some of them are getting refunds, they'll be keen to get their tax returns done. So communication is good, and not for them to assume that they can go to their tax agent on the 29th and get their tax return done until you complete that finalisation process. So how do we do the finalisation process? Well, let's have a look and see. We go into the payroll reporting section, and that payroll reporting section, or single touch payroll reporting as it is in the browser version, is where we can check to see that all the reports have gone through and been accepted. All of those reports that we do each pay event, where we do the declaration for the employees to the ATO, we want to make sure all of those reports have been accepted and there are no issues. So when you first come into this payroll reporting area, and I might just quickly show my screen, just in case there's anyone who hasn't carried out this process before, is that to go into that area, you go into payroll. Let me just switch my screen. Sorry, I think it didn't quite switch. There we go. You should be able to go into Payroll, and it's over on the right-hand side in the online version. Payroll reporting is where you go, and if you're in the browser version, you'll have a menu at the top, and that will allow you to go into single touch payroll reporting from the payroll menu. So it is important to ensure that all of the pays that have gone throughout the year have been accepted. So I would be checking to make sure over here on the right hand side they are all showing as accepted. That's the first step I do in here. You may have somebody in your organisation processing the pays, but maybe not doing the declaration. So you need to make sure that the declarations have been completed, because sometimes at a busy time of year, it takes a while for them. They show as sent for a while, and then they go through as being accepted, hopefully. Alternatively, if they have not been accepted, you can resend them. There is an option up the top left, and you can see on my screen here, just make sure you're working in the correct payroll year, particularly as if you're doing this in July. So in this screen, under this STP reports area, the first tab under single touch payroll reporting, you'll see that you can check the status, you check the right year, but there's also a nice feature called Send Update Event, and this will synchronize your data with the ATO before waiting until your next pay run. Sending an update event is particularly useful to push through the latest year-to-date data to the ATO, and this update event will create a $0 pay run. Remember, for those who've been doing this a while, in past years we had to go in individually if we had issues with balancing, and we had to put an individual $0 paycheck in. You may have not experienced that, but I certainly had to fix up a few payrolls in the past few years, and it was quite time consuming to have to go through this individually. So it's great that we have this Send Update Event option, and I encourage you to use that, particularly if your figures are not looking like they're balancing. Moving across to the next tab, the employment terminations for staff who've left the organisation. Ensure their termination dates are showing in here by adding their date of termination separate to putting it on the card file. So you'll select Add Termination, having those dates handy, and also the reasons. Select the employee coming up, and you'll select the reason that that employee has left the organisation, and you'll notify the ATO. And this is something that was introduced as part of Single Touch Payroll Phase 2, which means you no longer have to do those cessation certificates. When an employee requests it from you, they might have needed to take it to Centrelink or for other reasons. You no longer have to do that reporting as a separate document. It's done through STP Phase 2. So remember to notify the ATO. You may be doing this throughout the year. You can carry out this task throughout the year, so it doesn't have to wait until end of payroll year. But if you have not carried out that task so far, complete that process as part of end of year. Now we start getting closer to being ready to finalise. We go to the end of year finalisation tab, and over on the right hand side we select the Enable RFBA, the reportable fringe benefits amounts. For those, and many on board today, I'm sure will be reporting, have the exempt benefits or needing to report fringe benefit amounts. So tick the box over on the right hand side under this third tab, end of year finalisation, and what will appear will be 2 extra boxes for you to key in those amounts that you were very well organised before as part of your preparation. You've got those figures and you can key them in against each employee. And the 3-way balancing I talked about earlier on, a key report, and if you remember nothing else from today, please run that View Year-to-Date Verification report. This is a key report that will give you the totals that are going to be reported to the ATO. Now with STP2, those details have been expanded, with that remapping of those payroll categories. So originally in single touch payroll phase 1, the figures were reported as gross, tax, superannuation, allowances, and not too much more. Those figures in STP1 we matched back to our payroll summary report, that report that I showed you earlier on. In STP2, those payroll category mapping to the ATO reporting category has been expanded out to a longer list. So the report you'll see this year for year-to-date totals will be in a lot more detail, as you can see on the left. But again, it should still it should still reflect and equal those figures that you'll see in your payroll summary reports. So as I said, my tip for you, if you remember nothing else from today, is to run that year-to-date verification report inside of the finalisation area and look at those figures to balance them back, to validate those figures and make sure they agree to your other payroll reports. And these are just some screenshots just to remind you, it was probably 6 to 12 months ago since some of you did the mapping, or I call it mapping, or the matching up or the reallocation of those payroll categories to the ATO reporting category. Or maybe you didn't do that process. Maybe that's something to check now before you do the finalisation, because somebody else actually carried out that process in your payroll. Or maybe it was just so long ago you can't remember and you just need to check those figures. But once you're satisfied with those figures, oh, actually I added this table just this morning. I thought this was quite handy. This is a table that is on the MYOB website. And on the left-hand side, it shows the ATO reporting category from phase 1. So that's what we used to have as our reporting categories that we listed or mapped in the payroll categories inside MYOB. The second column is the expanded list. And I know for some of our clients, or some of the work I've been doing over the past 12 months, is that some people just did everything against gross payments again. And we've had to fix those payroll categories up by correctly allocating them to the expanded list that the ATO has provided us with phase 2. So be aware of these expanded lists, including in your allowances, and there's some extra ones with the termination payments, like those for the lump sum payments as well. So handy table, if anyone's interested, I'll give you my contact details. I can send you that link a bit later on. And a reminder here, everyone should be reporting under single touch payroll phase 2. I probably should have done a poll with that, but you're welcome to put in the chat or the questions section if you have any reason why you can't be reporting under single touch payroll phase 2, but the exemption ended for MYOB users in December. So we're getting close, folks, to finishing this process under the end of year finalisation area. Once we've carried out our balancing, once we've put in the reportable fringe benefits amount, and importantly, feel confident that those year-to-date verification reports all match, we can then select the top of the list of all the employees and make use of the finalisation process. So the actual finalisation is quite straightforward. It's the processes we carry out leading up to that to feel confident when our staff come back to us with a query, possibly, about the figures that have been reported, that we are confident that they balance to what across all the different areas, payroll, financial reports, and in the finalisation area. There will be a declaration box come up as you're declaring the year-to-date figures are correct, or the final figures are correct. And at that point, when you finalise and notify the ATO, your process is done. And this all gets carried out in that payroll reporting section in the online version, or in the menu of payroll under single touch payroll in the browser version. That is your process done. And then in the MyGov accounts for the employees, the status will change from not tax ready to tax ready, and that's when the tax agent knows and the employee knows in their MyGov account. They'll be able to see that they are able to now do their tax returns. So no payment summaries, as we said, no emailing anything, as many of you probably haven't had to do for the last couple of years. That all happens inside the finalisation process. There is actually a prompt that comes up in as an end of year guide in MYOB. I noticed that came out with a recent update. It gives you a bit of a summary to indicate finish your pay runs. I normally do my balancing first and then tell the ATO about terminated employees, send the payroll data to the ATO and make sure it's all correct before our first pay run in July. And probably at that point we do a high five, is that right? We get a bit excited. And hopefully it all balances, and then you can breathe a sigh of relief that that year has been completed. And it's a good reminder too that with single touch payroll, there are some benefits. I know we often see there's an administrative burden at times having to do these extra tasks, but it's a good reminder at this time of year that you no longer need, once in your STP2, assuming everyone's in STP2, you no longer need to post those tax file declarations to the tax office. You no longer need to issue separation certificates. It's all done within the software, nor do you need to do lump sum e-letters. Again, it's all within the software, within the functionality of STP2. So isn't it great that MYOB provides us all this functionality? Fantastic. It's all within the software. And when we're paying our subscriptions each year, it's a good reminder as to the updates that keep coming out behind the scenes that are helping us with our payroll processes. So we might just pause for a moment. And Kira, is there any burning questions? I'm not sure, can I see the questions, or is there any burning questions that we want to address before we move into the next area called time-saving tips and tools, or should we address them at the end, do you think?
I've got a few here. We probably could get through. Maybe I'll pick 3 or 4 and then we can move on. Sue has asked, I have not used the superannuation automatic payment for MYOB because our business requires 2 people to approve movement of monies out of account. Am I correct in assuming that the super function is a single person only task? Can you suggest any workaround for this?
Okay, can we answer that question in the next? That's in my tips and tools area.
Okay.
So great question. Thank you for that one. We'll address that shortly.
Max has, I have looked at the browser version a few times, but it doesn't seem to have the full functionality of the online version, particularly with regard to inventory. He's wondering if this is correct.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So MYOB has been continuing to build out and develop the browser version, and that's why we're able to switch between the two. You're correct, inventory is not 100% the same as the in the online version, has more functionality, but it's certainly, there's more and more being built into the inventory in the browser version. So watch this space. MYOB is continuing to do those developments. They just prioritised, I believe, the areas that were most used, and you can switch between the two. But you're correct, there are, and not just in inventory, in a couple of other areas, not everything is in the browser yet, but the development is certainly happening in the browser, and you'll continue to see those features developed in the browser over time. And in fact, there's a lot of features that are in the browser that actually aren't in the online, in the MYOB AccountRight traditional online version. So that's almost another webinar, I think, Kira. So, but yes, I think there is even if you do a search on the, browser versus MYOB online, I think there's actually on one of the MYOB website pages a comparison between what's in each of them. If not, I'm happy to find it and send it to that to the person.
One more here we can do for the moment. We've got Gina. In payroll reporting, there are a couple that have been accepted with errors, followed by accepted 1. Do I have to go back to fix those? Does that make sense, or do I need to read that again?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to, so you can try and resend them. I would try and resend them. I'd send an update event to see if that fixes it. And it depends what the errors are. So sometimes those errors actually give you an indication of what they are. So if they do, you might have to go back in and correct something like a name or some address details as an example. But I'd try resending them within that area or doing the updated event and just see if that fixes it. If not, you'd need to talk to support, or we can help you with finding out what those issues, why they're not, why they've been rejected.
And one more from Gina. Staff member has left but then recommenced, and STP messages repeat wanting a reason for termination even though they have recommenced.
So if I understand correctly, you might have to, so can you ask that question again? Sorry.
Yep. So staff member has left but then recommenced work, I guess, and STP messages repeat wanting a reason for the termination even though they have recommenced.
Yeah, so you might need to do something in that terminations area to reactivate them, because they're, when you terminate a staff member now with STP2, it wants a reason with STP2. So it keeps saying, we're wanting a reason why you've terminated them. So you'd have to reactivate that employee so that it's not continuing to ask for the reason, because that's the reason is now a compulsory field in STP2.
Let's see what else. We'll do one more. Is there any link between putting termination dates in the online version and the browser version, or do they have to do in both?
No, it's the same database. So the two different areas you have to put the termination dates in. If you're in the online version, you put it in the card file, and you also have to put in the finalisation area. If you're in the browser version, you still have to put it into the equivalent of the card file, the employees area, and that will update that, and you still have to put it into that finalisation area. So when I was referring to the two areas, I wasn't referring to having to do it in online and in the browser. It's in that, I'm not sure if I got that same slide again, but in that payroll reporting centre where you're doing the finalisation, that's where you put the reason area. That's why everyone needs to put it in there.
Okay, and do you want to do a little bit more and then we can do some more questions and answers?
Yeah, so we keep going on with the time-saving tips and then we'll do some questions at the end. I'm just conscious of the time and we've got a few more slides to go.
Excellent.
All right, excellent. And yes, we'll certainly have a look at all those questions at the end, and if you miss getting them answered, I think Kira's indicated that we'll respond on a separate email, as I know we've got quite a few people on board today, which is fantastic. I did want to make sure I had some time to give you some time back with some time-saving tips and tools. Over the years, I've found a couple of features as the product has evolved with some, they might seem like small, but for me, if I can save a couple of minutes here and there, whenever I, for example, onboard a staff member, it can save me some time so I can focus on doing some other tasks. So my first tip for you is, or question I guess is, have you tried out the employee self-onboarding tool? It is a feature that was introduced to allow a new employee to send their personal details, their banking, tax, and superannuation details straight into your MYOB company file. It's safe and secure. It means it reduces your paperwork and can simplify your onboarding workflow process. All you need to do is go in and send a request to the employee from within the payroll area, which I'll show you in a moment, and almost immediately an employee card is created. You can then, once they've filled out their details, open up the card and put in and fill out the extra details that they haven't completed. So it puts the onus back on the employee to correctly put in their bank account, their superannuation details, and other information such as their email address, rather than you having to go in and retype it. Be interested to know, have you tried this tool out? And is that something you found of interest, of use? And MYOB has certainly improved this feature. They've taken on board suggestions. And so it used to take quite some time for the card file to be created. In fact, when they first introduced this feature, you had to wait until the employee filled out all the details before the card was completed, before the card was actually created. Let me switch back and see if this will work, if I can show you in a file. So in MYOB, it's under Payroll, it's under Employee Self-Onboarding, and you simply put in the name. And let me just show you. This is in the card, one of the card files here. I've just got 2 employees in this card file. So if I was to, and it also shows in this card file area. So if I put in Fred Smith and I put in Fred's details, oops. Sorry, I've had trouble with, I've just got a new device, so sorry, it just keeps switching back to the UK mode. And you can put mobile in for text. So as soon as I send the self-onboarding form, an online form, this will then create a card in MYOB, gives you a nice little message, and you'll also get notification when they've completed their details, and you can then fill out the rest of the information. So it's almost immediate. If I go into my cards, there we go, there's Fred created. So when I go into Fred, I then have a normal card. I can then complete the details. It does give me a warning down the bottom to let you know that once the employees finish their details, you'll get notification, because as you can see, if you entered information and they put details in, the employee's version will override what you've entered. So just be aware of that process. But is that something that you might like to use? Would that save you some time? That's one of my tips for you today. This is a screen showing you what the employees see, and they will be able to complete the details, and then you'll be able to go in and further expand on that information. So it can actually streamline when you onboard employees to start with. So I'd be interested to know, have you used that feature before, or is that something from today that you might start using? This is a summary of what the employee submits on the left, and what on the right hand side, the information you put in. So be assured you put in their hourly rates, you allocate the wage categories, you add any additional super salary sacrificed amounts, any leave, all of that payroll dollar values. But the good thing is they put in all the other key contacts, superannuation funds, tax file number, and bank account details. So it puts the onus back on them. My next time-saving tip, well, I guess this is a reminder more so than a time-saving tip, although it does lead into a time-saving tip. So superannuation, a reminder, it increases from 1st of July. That's payrolls dated 1st of July, and it's going up each year by 0.5%, subject to any other changes that might occur. So keep that on your radar. Keep it in light of doing budgets. In fact, tomorrow I'm on another webinar, I think, here with Mick from CalCSA, talking budgeting and cash flow. I'm a guest in there. And one of the things to be aware of when you're doing your budgets for this year is that increase, and for future years, of the increase of superannuation. Reminder that that rate increases from the payment date. So MYOB is based on the payment date. So if you date your payrolls 1st of July, no matter what the time period is for, 11% applies on that full period. If you date the pays the 30th of June, the superannuation is at 10.5%. So watch out for the payment date and be aware of that 11%. Now, many of you will be thinking, oh, I've got to put that in my calendar to make sure I do that increase in between the pay runs. Not sure if any of you discovered the update that happened some versions ago. And my tip for you in the superannuation area is, instead of manually increasing the super category each year, did you know there's actually a setting that will do the increase for you? So see on my screen, there is a little tick box that says minimum rate required rate. At the moment, it'll show us 10.5%. So if you're using the standard super guarantee, then on the 1st of July, MYOB will automatically, when you do a pay dated the 1st of July, increase the rate to the 11%. Now, if you're switching between the different years and you're doing adjustments, just keep an eye on that. But MYOB is doing the calculation basis increase for you automatically. That feature was introduced last year, by the way, and it's a really handy feature. You may not have changed the setting. Maybe you've got yours on equals a percent, so that you manually have to change it each year. So be aware of that feature, and that might be a handy automation tip for you. Automated pay superannuation. I think one of our attendees earlier on asked a question about this feature. So I love this tool. This tool is not new. It's been around for quite some time. It's been a great time saver for many organisations, and it means that instead of having to go into a small business clearinghouse or import any figures, MYOB has this great tool called Pay Superannuation inside of your software. It picks up the figures from Payroll. You still do your normal reviews, but instead of having to go outside of the software, you simply make the selection to agree to those amounts being paid to the super funds. And with a couple of authorization processes, the payment's done. MYOB sweeps the money out of your bank account at the end of the day. If you do it by, I think, cut-offs 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, as long as you do your payment, and you don't have to do any EFTs or any transfers of money, MYOB will sweep the money out of your account and do the dispersion of the funds to all the superannuation funds. Such a great time saver, really one of my top time saving tips. If you're not already using it, great feature. Now, I heard a question was asked earlier on about authorizations. When you set up Pay Super, you get asked the question about how you want to do the authorization. You can, unless it's changed just recently, but you can go in and you can indicate that you want multiple people to do the authorizations. Let me check to see if it hasn't changed recently. But normally when you go through the process, it asks you how many people you want to do the authorization, and you put their mobile phones in for each of those people, and then you will go in, the first person will do the authorization, and then, because in many want to reduce risk and have division of duties, so quite often we set up a 2-step or 2-person authorization in this area. So if you're not already set up that way, you could go back into your settings and potentially make that change, or contact MYOB support and they can help you do that process. I've just put on the screen the normal due dates that the superannuation is due by, because you may have seen some communications come through saying that you need to have made your payments by the 30th of June, and that is for organisations that are wanting to claim the payment as a tax deduction. So not relevant to all organisations today on our sessions, but if you are a for-profit, then you need to have, or in fact, I think today is the cut-off, 21st of June, 4 p.m. So if you are a for-profit organisation and you're wanting your superannuation payments to get into the funds by the 30th of June, then you probably have a few tasks to add to your checklist to go off and do after we finish our session today. Otherwise, just make sure you pay your payments with those due dates that we had on that earlier screen. My next point about time savers is really something that the software is providing for us, in that the tax scales are all automatically updated. We don't have to do any updates anymore. There's no need to close the rollover of the payroll year. It's all about the finalisation process. But as part of that, a reminder about using that locked period feature in MYOB. It's more and more important now because there's no actual close off of payroll. You can actually do pays dated the 30th of June and do payrolls dated the 1st of July because there is no actual close off that you may have been used to, as I have over past years. But that puts more and more emphasis on locking the data up to that close off period. And it may not be 30th of June because you're still doing other work, but you might want to lock it to quite a closer period of time than leaving it open for the whole quarter because you've finished off payrolls. So I guess I'm trying to highlight that locked period feature is more and more important. Do we need some more time-saving tips? Well, I'm just going to throw a couple more at you before we wrap up our session. I've still got a couple more. Have you ever been in the middle of a pay run and needed to add a one-off payment and thought, oh, I'm in the middle of a pay run, I want to put a bonus in, or I want to put some sort of adjustment, some sort of extra payment, and that employee is not attached to that payroll category? This tip for you is in the MYOB AccountRight product. So this is where you can, even in the middle of a pay run, add a payroll category. Let me show you that. It's probably easier if I show you. So let's switch back into MYOB, and hopefully some of these tips are handy. Let me know, or let Kira know. It's always good to get some feedback about are you using some of these tips already, or what's your biggest time-saving tip? So you should be able to see MYOB on my screen, and you might see that I'm going to process a payroll. And I'm going to go in and pay my staff. And you're in the middle of a pay run and you think, oh gosh, I really need to put in a bonus and pay Mary a bonus. So you then have to go out, then you go and attach to her card. It can be quite annoying in some cases, but up the top left, did you know there's an add payroll category button? And this is where you can say, yep, I want to pay her a bonus just for this pay. I don't want to end up having all of these ticked and having a big long list. I just want it for this one pay. Alternatively, add payroll category also allows you to save it for future pay runs. So let's say I want to pay her a meal allowance, and she is normally meant to have a meal allowance every pay run, and I keep forgetting to go back and add it each time. So what I can do is I can actually tick the box to say save changes for future pay runs, and that's that little tick box down the bottom here. And when I select OK, that means that not only can I include the meal allowance for this pay run, I can also, it will also be ticked, and I don't have to remember to go back in and add it for the next one. So is that handy? Maybe you've already discovered that feature. A reminder about backups. You can do a backup even when online. Some people I know like to do a backup to have a pre-end of payroll year backup. So that is available to those who are working in the MYOB online version. So if you're able to switch between the two, you can go to your file menu and select to do a backup. And of course, at this time of year, particularly, it's important to and useful to be able to engage with others and connect with your auditor, or you have an external bookkeeper, or maybe you're still working in different locations. I know in organisations I've worked with, there was a couple of staff still working remotely, and we can, because that's the beauty of working online. So the setup menu allows you to invite multiple users in, giving them limited access if that's required, and also inviting your auditor in. Did you know there's a read-only access when you invite a user in? So you could invite in your treasurer, who you might want to give read, or depending on their role, a person in with read-only access so that they are not doing any transactions and they're able to actually run some reports. A reminder about the locked period date, it's even more important. And it's also important to celebrate at this time of year that we've achieved our end of financial year and maybe learnt a few time-saving tips. And to give yourself a pat on the back when you do finish off payroll, because payroll is such an important task. We don't often get the pat on the back. by the employees. It's often the where's our information, but celebrate your successes, folks, and that you've completed another payroll year or another financial year, and we welcome in a new financial year very soon, coming up in a couple of weeks. So we have gone over time a little bit, Kira, apologies, but thank you. Hopefully you've picked up some tips from today's session. I know I did go through it quite quickly when I was putting together the content. I always have so much information to pass on. I realise that an hour is not enough, but maybe that's a topic for another day that some people might be interested in. I've got some contact details on there if you're wanting to keep in touch with me. I have recently just changed from working in an accounting firm, now operating under Poetry in Numbers with a double N in there. I realise that spelling might be interesting, but if anyone's interested in keeping in touch, my contact details are there. I am going to be on a few presentations and doing quite a few end of years for clients in the coming weeks, so email is probably the best way, or via LinkedIn. And if you are interested in getting a sample payroll interview checklist, I'm happy to share one that I've got that I refer to. More than happy to keep in touch. And do we have any questions, or did we lose everyone because I ran over time?
No, we still have people. We've got a few questions. We can start and see how much we can get through anyway. What have we got here? If you don't have RFBA, do you still need to enable the RFBA button?
No, if you don't have any reportable fringe benefits, don't tick that box. It's better to leave it off. Just don't tick that box if that's not relevant to you.
Okay, ATO payroll category for annual leave. Is it gross wages or other leave?
Great question. This is probably one of the ones that most people do get incorrect. So your paid leave is other paid leave as opposed to gross payments. Most people just put it into gross payments because it's right down the bottom of the list. So make sure you scroll down the bottom of the list. So that ATO reporting category for your paid leave is other paid leave. Yeah.
Does the final STP file need to be sent before the first pay in July?
Yes, it's best to be done before the first pay in July because staff will be asking you and you want to have it all finalised. You can do it later, but it's much better to have it all done before you do your first pay run. Yeah.
Does the employee staff onboarding replace the tax declaration form?
Does it? You still need to get the information from the staff. I've had differing views. Some people still like to get the paper form from staff because they like to have that piece of paper and scan it and keep a record of it. You don't need to send it to the tax office, but you do need to get the information from the employee. So in most cases, I'm finding bookkeepers are generally keeping the paper copy.
Does the employee staff onboarding, oh, look at that one. Can you send employee onboarding invite to existing employees to check that all their details are up to date?
You have to be, you could. I haven't done that, to be honest. It's well, you've already got a card for them. It's intended to be the onboarding initially. But that's a good thought. I haven't done that. I have to check to see whether it would cause any issues because the card is already set up. So leave that one with me. I can check to see if that's going to cause any issues. As I said, it is intended to be the onboarding process.
Just confirming, you don't need to finalise one payroll year before running a pay run in the next.
I recommend you do that, but you don't need to.
And can you finalise the STP2 process before end of June if you have done the last pay run for the year?
Sorry, Kira, I didn't quite hear that last bit.
Can you finalise the STP2 process before the end of June if you have done your last pay run for the year?
Yes, you can. You can do it if you've got, if you've done your last pay today, for example, you could do it this afternoon. I guess, so yes is a short answer. I guess I would be careful about whether or not you end up having any other pays come through that are unexpected, and then you have to go and redo them and redo your balancing process. So we normally recommend you wait till next week to do it, so in that last week leading up to the 30th of June, but you can do it today, for example, if you have a need to do it for whatever reason to do with timing, you can actually do that.
Okay, I think that is it for questions. Thank you so much, Pam, for coming along today. And as Pam mentioned, she's back tomorrow. We have another free webinar running about end of year management reports with Alexa from Mick, and Pam will be back in there as well to give some tips and more info. And yeah, we will definitely be doing more MYOB, I think, webinars. It seems to be a big demand at the moment. And after this this webinar, over the next 2 days, I will get it uploaded online with a link and slides as well for everyone to get Pam's contact details and access the webinar again. But other than that, everyone have a great day. Thank you so much again, Pam, and we will chat shortly.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.